Today I want to refer to something that is a lost art. The art of the static camera. The peak of this was in the year 2001, while previously you had gorgeous games. Many used various tricks. The most obvious, to many people, would be the game Dragon's Lair. The early arcade game was nothing more than a series of QuickTime events, allowing them to use Disney animators, who meticulously drew every scene by hand, allowing it to go far ahead of the arcade hardware of 1984, even receiving ports to computer platforms such as the Commodore Amiga, with a measly 1 megabyte of RAM and a CPU. Not much better. However, by the time of Doom, this was largely gone. It was fading out, and while isometric games still did look beautiful, in later years you had Roller Coaster Tycoon, and you had Fallout. You had many of these games, and they were quite popular. But they weren't as interactive. And as interactive games go, first person shooters and platformers were the way of the day. The same year, the same month, and one day apart, Quake and Super Mario 64 were released. Super Mario 64 did something that Quake couldn't. A camera not controlled by the player, allowing the player to be guided through the level. This allowed Super Mario 64 to have far more detail than Quake ever could hope to. Quake made use of this, with abstract Lovecraftian atmospheres, weaving its limitation into the design. But within just 2 years, it became clear that this would no longer work. Games in upcoming years would use brushwork to fake this. But these did not hold up as well as they would hope. The FPS genre struggled to keep a coherent sense of realism, partially because, even mainly because, of how close they had to focus the player. The player could fully explore and see any nook, cranny, and bookshelf on the map. He could see all of its problems at a glance. But there was a solution, a way in which to hide all of these problems, a way in which some of the greatest games of all time used to get around this. No year is more emblematic of this than 2001. The same year which gave us the two greatest games ever made in this style, Silent Hill 2 and Devil May Cry 1. Devil May Cry 1 is to this day an absolutely stunning game. Its low-res textures would not have been able to hold up if it were a first-person shooter such as Quake. Its lighting effects would not either. They are incredibly primitive by today's standards, simply casting a brighter image on a large portion of the screen, nothing resembling what we have. Its baked volumetrics are implemented very crudely, and simply as well. There is no great standard compared to even games of its era, which were done better, though not to as great an extent. But all of this could be worked around through the camera. None of these problems were apparent in gameplay to anyone witnessing it. The PS2's 8 megabytes of memory for the textures and the gameplay were great limitations. Even games years later, such as GTA San Andreas, look absolutely terrible in terms of texture quality. First-person shooters on the console did not do much better. Games such as SOCOM and Black look incredibly rough in the texturing department. But this game has no such problem. Working with the same textures, the same quality. This game has a remarkable quality about it. That is because, even though the textures are heavily reused, stretched, and blurry, it doesn't matter. Because it is as if you are walking through a painting. When you observe a painting, you don't observe what is behind the painting. If there is a building in a painting, you don't go inside of the building in that painting. And the fixed camera angle can do the same thing. Right here you can see, underneath this stair, there is just nothing. A black hole, which was never patched out. The stairs do not have a stand, and do not have anything to support them. But when I played this game, that was never on my mind. Because the game would never make you think about it. And this scene is absolutely gorgeous. Though, if you were to get very close to it, you would be able to see that instead of 3D models or realistic looking bookshelves, it is mere brushwork as we see in games such as Quake and Perilous Warp. But the camera perfectly obscures that, which is part of the reason that this game, and Silent Hill 2, look so good even compared to modern games. Because above all else, the point of a game, in the graphical sense, is perspective, and that is truly a lost art. Today, our games are big for the sake of being big, and empty for the sake of being big. They are dumbed down, becoming mere Last of Us and Uncharted clones, learning the cheapest lessons of whatever is popular. So, this style of camera has all but died. Only a few indie games still use this style, and AAA has long abandoned it. Capcom, with their old remasters, being the last to hold on to it, which they did up until the Resident Evil 2 remake. Resident Evil 4 remake had a modern Last of Us camera. Silent Hill 2 remake had a modern Last of Us camera. The camera is controllable, easy to interact with, and does not create this sense of scope and scale in the player. In the 360 era, we had a lot made of the John Woo style shooter, namely with Max Payne and Stranglehold. But I think these truly miss the point. The reason that John Woo films seem so incredible and feel so cohesive is because of the good use of camera work. A camera cut is done, an action is done, and then a new camera cut shows the continuing action. Rather than just one camera guiding you through, the camera has a purpose in every time it is used. When you have these modern third-person cameras, you cannot show the player anything. You cannot teach the player anything. It simply becomes another annoying thing to fiddle with, which can go wrong. Because of this, Devil May Cry 1 and Silent Hill 2 still remain remarkably good looking. And this specific room I'm in would never hold up in an FPS, or even a modern God of War style game. These textures, viewed closely, would be resembled as mere facsimiles of books. But from out here, it looks like an ever-expanding library. A library which can stretch up into heaven and down into hell, throughout the pantheons and back. We have lost this, but the style could have been kept. However, when a style becomes new in this industry, its cheapest lessons are learned. So this style was all but abandoned for what would sell to a mass market. Something which must be done in an era where the Silent Hill 2 remake had 2.5 times the budget of the original game, where the Resident Evil 1 remake had 10 times the budget of the original game, and the Resident Evil 4 remake had 8 times the budget of the original game. The industry is far too bloated to pursue original ideas, so every game will remain the same until we accept the uncomfortable reality that many, many people need to be laid off, a thing which we must celebrate for the health of the embassy. Killing off the defective organs and the defective organisms to save the forest. If you do not remove the algae from the pond, you will have problems within it. If you do not remove the shark from the fish tank, you won't have any fish. But in states such as Vermont, you are required to cull the population, or the population will die. Much of modern American hunting practices and license distribution is based on this concept. There is only so much food that can go around. And right now, we only should be feeding about 10% of the people.